Hello, Professor Gardner. My name is Nathan Hillman, and this is my blog presentation. The topic for my blog that I chose was fly fishing. I figured it was a niche enough sport and a niche enough topic that not everyone would be doing it. And I've been doing it since I was a little kid. It's my favorite sport of choice, and I figured I knew enough about it to write a blog about it. The stigma with fly fishing is that it's not an easy sport to get into. There are a lot of frustrating aspects about it. There's a lot of knots you need to learn, a lot of equipment you need to learn. It requires a ton of expensive gear. It's super complicated and not a friendly sport to get into. And that's just not true. And I wanted to create a blog where beginners could go to and get all the basic information that they need in order to start the sport, whether they're just interested in learning more about it or they're just barely starting to get into it. From the market research I did, all the blogs I could find that are out there, they didn't have a lot of consistency to them. They would start posting very regularly, and then they kind of would run out of information, and then about a year in, they would just taper off or stop altogether. They tended to be very complicated, especially when they were running out of material. They would get into the really nitty-gritty aspects of the sport and the complicated pieces of gear and things like that. So there was not really anything geared towards beginners. There was no personal aspect to them. There was no get-togethers. There wasn't a lot of activity in the comments. There wasn't really a ask us about this or clarify these points, features, or anything like that. And then a lot of them were kind of run by sponsorships. All the blogs I could find were either sponsored by Cabela's or a fly fishing company like Orvis or Sage or something like that. There wasn't a lot of, I guess, just fly fishermen running the blogs. And so I wanted to create a blog that was obviously ran by a fly fisherman and had a lot more personal aspect to it, that was focused towards beginners, to novices in the sport, focuses on simplicity, didn't really get into all the complicated topics, didn't get into specific rivers or specific areas, just focused on the basics of the sport. I wanted to be super friendly. I wanted to be a place where you could ask questions and not feel new or I felt like your questions were inherent or stupid. I really wanted that focus of community. So with that in mind, let's look at my blog. So here it is, the beginner fly fisherman. This is my opening page. I want to keep it simple, just a rod and reel with a nice tagline, tip, tricks, and direction for fly fishing beginners. I wanted the top bar to be pretty simple and straightforward. I didn't want a ton of widgets up there, just with the frequently asked question, the blog feed, and then the home button. At the bottom, I had another bar of widgets for like a upcoming event calendar, the Instagram, and then the search bar. And then through here, you kind of see my blog posts. I designed all these little headers in Canva, kept them black and white and simple. I thought these images turned out really good, and they're really specific to each of the topics. So let's look at just a few of them. Let's look at one of my lists. So coming in, I liked all the white space of this design. When I chose it, it was very simple and straightforward, focused on the words and the information. And then at the bottom of each of these posts, there's a big questions and contact us page, which will take you to the contact information page. Again, I wanted this to be a user-friendly, and so there's the email you can write your questions to. Nice little friendly greeting there. And yeah, again, I wanted this to be super user-friendly and straightforward. So these are all just my individual blog posts. You can see there's all 8 of them there. We'll go into my multimedia post. I decided to do knots as my multimedia post. This one I chose because it was one that it seems to be one of the more stigmaed, complicated parts of the sport, and one that I figured I just kind of show the simplicity of it. And so in this video, I show just 2 very simple fly fishing knots, which are basically 2 of the only ones you need to know. So we'll just play that real quick.
Hello everyone, it's Nate with the Beginner Fly Fisherman.
This is recorded from my iPhone. I did use a mic, so that was a good tidbit from one of our modules in
These
the
knobs are
class.
simple, and there's a wide
The
variety
sound
of
sounds
things you can use them
way
for.
better
For this demonstration,
in this
I'm not
video
going
than
to
it did
use
in
any
my
fishing line or tippet
introduction
or any
video
flies, just
to
because it's a
myself.
little bit harder to see in the video. And
I
also,
rigged a pretty
starting
cool
out,
apparatus
it's
for
a
my
little bit
ceiling
easier
so
to
that it could be a
use something
face down
bigger, so you can see how the
view
knot's
of
falling
everything. I
and
thought
you
that
can
turned
duck
out
these
pretty good.
correctly. So I'm going to put these aside. Instead, we're going to use just a piece of 2mm cord, a couple pieces of it, to mimic our fly line, and then we're going to use an eyelet to mimic our flies.
Again, focusing on beginners, I didn't want to get into the complicated pieces of fly line or anything.
This is what you use to tie two pieces of tippet together when you're constructing your leader. So what you're going to do is take
So we'll just kind of skip through this. I'm sure you can watch that as you're grading all the blogs. But I felt that video turned out really well. It was really fun to make. I'll go back to my homepage. The other thing I wanted to focus on was this little beauty right here. I actually wrote this for another class, but I figured I would love to add it into my blog. This was the psychological motivation behind fly fishing. For those, like I said at the beginning, I wanted this blog to focus on beginners, but also people who are interested in getting into the sport. And through this article, I write, this research paper really, I write about really the psychological motivation behind fly fishing and why people are driven to do it. I focus on kind of how to market to fly fishers as well, but also we get into like McGuire and Maslow's theories of needs and things like that. So I was really proud of this. I had to include it into my blog, and I feel like even someone that's not really interested in fly fishing would love to read something like this. So if you have time, I'm sure you don't really creating all these blogs. I feel like you'd enjoy that. So that was my blog. It was super fun to make. I felt it turned out really well, and thanks for the great semester.